All right, everybody. Thank you so much for coming this evening. My name is Dr. Tessa Beach. I am the Chief of Planning and Chief of the Environmental Services Branch for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, San Francisco District. Am I projecting okay? Can you hear me in the back?
Louder, please.
A little bit louder? How's this?
Better.
Okay, great. So, welcome. I want to thank you all for your time coming here tonight. We are here to kick off the Army Corps and Partners Humboldt Dredging Nearshore Pilot Placement Project. And I'm really excited about this effort, and I'm really excited to see the great turnout that we have here tonight. We're interested in getting your input, your thoughts, your questions. We're going to go through a great presentation here, both with some of our Army Corps team and some of our partners as well. And then towards the end, we'll have a Q&A session, and we'll break out to different tables and have different areas where you can talk with our staff and give us some of your input as well. So next slide, please. All right, so the overall intent of the Nearshore Pilot Placement Project is really to test a new way to use the material that the Army Corps of Engineers dredges on an annual basis from the Humboldt Harbor entrance channel, so that's sandy, clean material in the entrance channel, to benefit people, infrastructure, and ecosystems in the North Coast region by placing that material in the nearshore environment as opposed to taking it out to the Humboldt open ocean disposal site and removing it from the system. We hope that this will help address some erosional issues and keep that sediment as a resource in the littoral system. Next slide, please. This fits into a broader effort that's being undertaken by the Army Corps as an agency at large, as well as the San Francisco District of the Corps specifically, to really invest in beneficial use of dredge material. We view dredge material as a resource, and at the highest levels of our organization, we have a command philosophy from our Chief of Engineers that's really seeking to beneficially use approximately 70% of the material we dredge from our navigation program nationally on an annual basis by 2030. Currently, we actually do about the flip side of that. We only beneficially use about 30%. And so we're really seeking a culture shift here for a variety of reasons. We have new innovative applications, things like this pilot project. We have goals at our agency level and at our district level. We have regulatory partners who are encouraging us to beneficially use material. Science is really demonstrating that this is an important resource that can be used, especially as we adapt to sea level rise, changing climates, and our physical environment is changing with climate change. So all of this is really leading us in the direction of expanded beneficial use across our agency, and part of the impetus for the pilot we'll be discussing today. Next slide, please. But achieving those goals wouldn't be possible without partnerships with resource agency partners and with stakeholders. So we're from the San Francisco District. You can see here in blue our area of operations, and we're talking today about one of our primary missions, which is navigation, but we also implement ecosystem restoration, flood risk management, water control. We have recreational lakes that are associated with some of our dams, and we operate all of those things within the blue area. For this pilot effort in particular, we've partnered closely with the Environmental Protection Agency, specifically Region 9 out of the San Francisco area. And their role is really to authorize the placement of dredge material in the ocean. So the existing Hood's open ocean disposal site was designated by EPA, and it's located about 3 miles offshore of the entrance channel. They also provide technical guidance and input for nearshore placement or even in-bay placement through the Clean Water Act 404 process. So EPA has been a great partner in this pilot effort thus far, and we will continue to collaborate with them. And you'll hear from some of our EPA partner staff as part of this presentation today. We also partnered with the Humboldt Harbor District. As many of you are probably aware, the district oversees and promotes port projects, including dredging, erosion control, and even shoreline protection projects. So this idea of the nearshore placement as a way to address erosional issues is very much in line with the operational emphasis of the harbor district itself. And I believe we have a couple of harbor district partners who will be joining us here today. Here, oh, perfect. Beyond our two primary partners, the EPA and the Humboldt Harbor District, we've also been coordinating with a variety of regulatory and resource agencies in order to ensure that this pilot is implemented in a way that's both successful and minimizes any potential impacts or effects to important resources. So some of the other agencies we've coordinated with, and you'll hear a little bit about the timeline, but we had a regulatory agency kickoff a few months ago. Include the California Coastal Commission, the Regional Water Board, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, particularly the National Marine Fisheries Service portion of that agency, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. Next slide, please. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that while today we're focused on Humboldt Harbor maintenance dredging and a new pilot way to use that material for beneficial purposes, the Army Corps of Engineers is also involved in other efforts in this region. A few years ago, we completed the Humboldt Harbor jetty repair. Our regulatory side of our department actually issues 404 permits for other efforts, particularly in this region. We recently completed 404 permitting for the Klamath River Dam removal. And then we have upcoming projects that we are hoping to complete in the region as well. For example, an ecosystem restoration project at the Redwood Creek Estuary. So next slide, please. I'm going to introduce our project team. That's me when I was an intern starting out 15 years ago with the San Francisco district. And we also have here today our project manager for the nearshore placement site and for operation and maintenance dredging at Humboldt Harbor, Mr. Peter Wolf. We have Savannah Fawning, who is our lead environmental manager for this effort, and she's actually located at our field office here in Eureka. We have Dr. James Zulas, who is the chief of our hydro survey section, back of the room over here. Not here today, but pictured as a sturgeon is John Dingler, who's a physical scientist and oceanographer, spent a long time working for the USGS and has been really instrumental in helping us identify the placement site and work through the modeling associated with that. We have Tiffany Chang here today. She's a coastal engineer with the San Francisco district. You'll hear from her in the presentation a little later. We have Alev Bilgensoy, who is our outreach coordinator for the district. Terry Giroux and Hans Moritz are actually here from our Portland district. They're in the back of the room over here, and they have implemented a similar effort up in Portland and are here to share some case studies and experiences from that. So we really appreciate you guys teaming with us and coming down for this. Next slide, please. And so again, we're partnering in this with project partners from the EPA and from the Harbor District. Jen Siu is a physical scientist with EPA Region 9, and she is online and will give a portion of this presentation. So you'll see her in a sec. We have Alan Oda, also from Region 9, who's an oceanographer. And then some of our partners from the Humboldt Harbor are Rob Homeland, who I don't believe is here tonight, but many of you may have been at the WIND meeting earlier today with him. Larry Ochter and Chris Nicholson, who are the executive director and deputy executive director for the district. Thank you guys for being here. All right, next slide, please. So I'm going to run through our agenda really quick. We just went through introductions for our project team, but in a second, I'm going to ask you all to pull out your phones and we're going to run through a little exercise so we can get to know you a little bit better and some of the background about why you're here today. Then we're going to do a deep dive into our nearshore project, both background and project design and description. This is where we're really looking for your input. We want to hear your questions. We want to hear, what resources you might be concerned about. Love it. That's great too. And then we'll go into a group question and answer. So we'll stay in the question and answer, sitting at tables. After that, we're going to break out. We have information stations set up around the room. We're going to have different members of our team available to answer questions and engage with you a little bit further about this pilot effort. So the information stations, number 1 is over here right behind me. This is really looking at regional assets in Humboldt Bay. What resources are you concerned about? Where are they found in this region? That will really help us as we move forward with evaluating and planning the pilot placement project. Station 2 is going to be over here, and it's going to be focused on dredging and beneficial use of dredge materials. So we want to learn more about the types of dredges and beneficial uses of those materials. That's your station. Station 3 is actually going to be right here at the second row. You guys want to raise your hands right there with the gray hat? Yep. That's where Station 3 is going to be in. They're going to be talking about surveying and monitoring. So we'll get that set up once people start to move around. Station 4 is in the back over here. We're going to talk about environmental effects of the project there. And then finally, Station 5 is back here with Terry and Hans, and they have a great set of information about prior case studies where they've done similar types of placements. All right, so this is where we do a little bit of introduction about you all. So for those of you who haven't done this before, this is a QR code. If you pull out your phone and open up the camera on your phone, you should be able to point it right here in this box area and pull up a set of questions that you can answer. And the 3 questions we'd love to hear from you about are, what is your favorite time of year in Humboldt County? How long have you been living here in Humboldt County? And what brought you here today? So I'm going to give you guys a little bit of time to do that, and then we'll pull up the results and talk about those a little bit. And if you need help, if you haven't used the QR code before, it's recently, first time I did that, we have staff in the room, so feel free to ask. We have a couple seats up here in the front if you're interested in sitting down. Yeah. Okay. Right. Yeah. All right, so let's start looking at some of the results. So the first question that we asked was, what is your favorite time of year in Humboldt County? It makes this cool word cloud, but it looks like a lot of people like summer and a lot of people like fall. Anytime is always good. October, I did some school down in San Diego, and we used to call it June gloom because we'd always get the fog in June time right down there. All right, cool. Let's check out the next one. Okay, how long have you lived in? We got a good span here. A lot of people have been here for like 15 to 30 years, 30 plus years. One person's been here forever, all their life. Great. Right. Then this one was what we really wanted to dive into a little bit more. So I'm going to read a couple of the responses, but if anybody wants to raise their hand and elaborate on why you came tonight, the floor is yours. So what brought you here today? Interest in beneficial reuse. That's awesome. That's really what, we're trying to accomplish more of, both as an agency and as a district and with our partners. Yeah, to make sure sediment is beneficially reused to support sea level resilience. That's great. Love of the Bay. I love that. Curiosity about the project. Great. We're here to answer your questions and get your input. We've got a retired NIMS fishery biologist that worked on dredging consultations. Awesome. We need your input. Let's see how this project will affect surfing and dunes. Trying to understand if this could affect surf at the jetty and peninsula. Interested in port development and associated environmental impacts. So definitely seeing a couple themes here. People really excited about beneficial use, people concerned about potential effects of the effort. So these are the types of things, pointing out on our maps here when we go to breakout stations, where those resources are that you're concerned about will be really helpful for us as we start to design and go through permitting for this beneficial use pilot project. Boat basin dredging. Listen, understanding the science behind the decision. Yeah, these are all great reasons to come, and we're really appreciative that you guys are here to engage with us. Point out some of your concerns and some of your interests. So thank you for being here. All right. Anybody want to take a stab at elaborating on why they're here tonight? Otherwise, you can listen to me talk for 2 more slides. Okay, I'll keep going. All right, so we did the introduction, sort of got the background context of the impetus for this pilot project, and now we're going to go a little bit more into project background. Next slide, please. So I'm going to start off with this first slide, and then you're going to hear from some of my other teammates and their partners. But essentially, as we've been talking about a little bit already, we, the Corps of Engineers, perform operation and maintenance dredging annually at Humboldt River. Generally, that happens in the springtime. The amount of dredging that is ongoing is both dependent on the material that has shoaled in and also on funding. And we dredge both the entrance channel, which is shown right here, as well as, in some cases, some of the smaller interior channels within the bay proper. And so, of the dredged material removed, approximately 90% is sand sized in terms of grain size, and less than 10% is like fine silty material. We have a breakout up here that shows the bar and entrance itself and some of the smaller interior channels, and it gives you a sense of the relative annual volume from those different areas and the type of material. You can see that most of it is sand, a little bit of sand and silt. And then historically, where we've been taking that material once we've dredged it is this area here, which is the Humboldt Open Ocean Disposal Site, or HOODS. And the effort that we're talking about today is looking at a potential nearshore placement site much closer to the shore, just up coast of the entrance channel. So as I mentioned at the beginning, when we talked a little bit about our partners on this project, the Humboldt Open Ocean Disposal Site is authorized by the EPA. And so I'm going to turn it over now to Jen Siu, one of our partners from the EPA. She's going to talk a little bit about the background of HOODS and some of our historical placement activities there. Jen, are you ready to take it away?
I am. Thank you so much, Tessa. Can everybody hear me okay?
I can.
All right, great. Thank you so much for coming. As Tessa said, and Alan and I, we're from EPA Region 9 down here in San Francisco, and we're sorry we can't be there in person. but maybe the next time. So both Alan and I are available for questions, both now when the time comes up during the presentations, and then later on after this meeting. So again, I'm a senior scientist. I'm on the ocean and sediment management team, and so I will walk us through just a few slides about hoods and how we manage it. So through our authorities, EPA designates, manages, and monitors ocean dredge disposal sites. Since 1995, the dredge material from Humboldt Harbor entrance channel and the upper channels has been placed at Hoods, which is our shallowest site at 150 to 200 feet in depth. Hoods lies just outside the Humboldt Nearshore littoral zone. A littoral cell or zone is a geographically limited area of active sand movement in offshore waters, and it drives multiple processes which are relevant to what we're discussing today. It drives shoreline erosion, it drives the creation of shoals and dunes from sand deposition, and it also drives longshore sand transport up and down the nearshore edge. Ocean dredge material disposal sites such as Hoods are only permitted by EPA if no other disposal alternatives are available. The reason is we want smart use of our dredge material. Can it be reused, in essence recycled from a loss as pure disposal, or for another purpose? As many of you may know, sand is a critical building block for eroding beaches if left in the littoral zone and or directly placed on beaches. Additionally, most of the material from the Corps' entrance channel, as Tessa described, is composed of 90% sand, which is free of chemical contaminants due to its inert nature. So it's clean sand. In contrast, in the upper channels, those fine silty muds that Tessa mentioned, it can tightly bind contaminants, and those require more testing to determine suitability for disposal. This figure on the right basically it depicts the general map of the expanded Hood site. The original Hood site, which was designated in 1995, is shown as quadrant 1, and it says closed. So no further disposal was allowed in there, and I will discuss why. Next slide, please. So here's our Hood's timeline. As I mentioned, in 1995, it was designated. In 2000, the Corps of Engineers deepened the Humboldt Bay Harbor channel, and this vastly increased the amount of material needing to be dredged on an annual basis and subsequently disposed of at Hoods. The Corps typically dredges about 1 million cubic yards per year of this material, and most of that is sand, which is basically marine sand coming back into the entrance channel during winter events. From 2006 through 2019, the annual disposal of these large sand volumes at Hoods resulted in mounding and the need to actively manage the Hoods disposal cells to avoid navigational hazards. Based on this situation and an understanding that the site would fill up at that rate, EPA called for expanding the site to accommodate those changes and future needs for disposal. We initiated formal rulemaking in 2019 to expand the Hood site, and in 2021 we issued a final environmental assessment, a final rule, and an updated site management and monitoring plan to officially expand those Hoods boundaries. In our environmental assessment document, we specifically identified this potential nearshore placement site and initially assessed it as a potential future alternative to ocean disposal. The nearshore site is an alternative that could be used in conjunction with disposal at Hoods to help minimize impacts and maximize the overall benefits of managing Humboldt Bay area dredge sediments. We do not anticipate closing Hoods as a disposal site. Next slide, please. So these two figures just illustrate the significant mounding that was happening at Hoods from 2006 to 2019. They strongly reiterate to me the importance of managing, sediment material in relation not only to its chemical and biological nature, but also to its size characterization. On the right is from a multi-beam survey that was completed in 2015, which showed how good the Corps is at being effective and precise at placement of sands in the prescribed grids that EPA gave them, and the sand is staying there. So this clean sand would be, I think, more useful back in the littoral cellar on the beaches rather than as a potential navigational hazard. Next slide, please. So as we're talking about the nearshore site, I want to say a couple things about what we anticipate. Utilizing both hoods and a nearshore placement site would give us options as we seek to holistically manage Humboldt sediment in an environmentally, socially, and economically beneficial way. Potential benefits from a nearshore placement site would include extending the life of hoods, keeping the sediment, specifically clean sediment, in the littoral system to help with shoreline resiliency in the face of sea level rise. And as we all know, protecting these shorelines also helps protect our communities and our built infrastructure. We also would, the nearshore placement site could help with mitigating erosion along the north spit of Humboldt Bay, which is, a direct result of all the modification that we did to build the channel itself, the navigational channel. So we also need to trade off with potential localized short-term impacts, such as expected temporary increases in turbidity and burial of benthic communities at the nearshore site during those sporadic times of the year where the Corps disposes of the sand. The goal here is for the long-term regional benefits that I've discussed to outweigh the short-term impacts that are noted. And this is going to be assessed during the project process. I also want to note that nearshore placement sites such as this they're not a new concept, and they have been successfully studied and utilized in the Northwest and the East Coast to feed starved littoral systems and serve those multi-benefits that we're looking for here. And you're going to hear, as you heard, we've got some of our Northwest Coast colleagues from the Corps available for your questions. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Peter Mull of the Corps to get into the specifics of the Nearshore project. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you, everybody. That was a lot of information. Thank you, Dr. Beach. Thank you, Ken. It's a lot to digest there. My name is Peter Mull. I'm the project manager for the annual maintenance dredging of Humboldt Harbor. I've been a long-time project manager on this effort, dating back to the early 2000s. So I'm going to just briefly, largely reiterate a lot of what you've heard from Dr. Beach and from Jane, but more specifically to what we are actually proposing with this action. As both Jen and Dr. Beach alluded to, nearshore placement is not a new concept that has been implemented in other areas. Indeed, starting in about 2007, 2008, we would attend the Humboldt Harbor Symposium, and we discussed this, and we have studied it with our Engineering Research Development Center as part of our dredge material management planning. So we have a lot of great studies of the hydrodynamics, the physical dynamics of this system that date back many years. I'm also the project manager for the San Francisco Main Ship Channel, where we have successfully implemented a very, very similar project for the main ship channel entrance to San Francisco Bay, where about 350,000 cubic yards annually are placed near an erosion hot zone that's threatening critical wastewater infrastructure by the city and county of San Francisco. And I noticed that there's some people here that were interested in the surfing impacts. I'm a long-time surfer at Ocean Beach, and it was great because we got to build our own sandbars, and surfing really benefited from our effort there. That effort is ongoing. We've been monitoring it and successfully operating very similar equipment to the exact same equipment actually that we operate here. And so we have a great familiarity both in the San Francisco district and, as has been mentioned, in the Northwest district, the Portland district, that's enough of it. So specifically what we are proposing, as has been mentioned, is to take dredge material from the barn entrance channel only. We're not speaking about nor the muddy or fine-grained materials from the interior channels, but specifically this part of the channel here, which is 95 to 99% sandy material, where we dredge about 1 million cubic yards a year on average out of the channel to maintain the authorized depth of 48 feet. Sometimes it's even 1.2 million. It's a significant volume of sediment. As Jen had mentioned, the barn entrance channel was deepened in the year 2000 approximately, and the previous annual maintenance was about 500,000 cubic yards. So since that time, a lot more sediment has been removed from the system. When I say the system, what I mean is the general nearshore transport of sand in the system coming from the Eel River, transporting along the shore from the south to the north. And that flow is interrupted by the introduction of ardent entrance to the bay, which is blocking that location. So what we are proposing to do is to beneficially use that sediment to nourish this portion of the system and to more mimic the way nature would naturally act with the sediment and just let it flow along the shoreline here in waters out to 80 feet deep. As Jen had mentioned, this is in very deep water, is less affected by the waves, although the bounding here has been potentially affecting wave refraction and can cause navigational safety issues as the waves bend and amplify around mountains there. So it's very critical that we don't allow this site to get overfilled. Provide safe navigation. We don't want to introduce new hazards into the navigational system. So what we're proposing is to take a significant fraction of the 1 million cubic yards per year and place it here and see how it works. There's really no way that you can just efficiently and effectively model this on the computer and actually see how it works in this system. Yes, we have great familiarity with how this works in other systems, but until we actually do it here, you know, we're not really 100%, you know, how the dredge can operate in these waters safely, you know, what the potential benefits are going to be, what the impacts are. So what we're proposing is a demonstration project. It's a pilot project where we'll take a fraction of that material, put it here, and monitor it closely and evaluate it on a scientific basis to see what the benefits are and what any potential adverse effects are. So that's it in a nutshell. Next slide, please. So since about the early 1990s, we've had a program where we monitor the shoreline adjacent to the harbor entrance, both on the south side and on the north side. And you can see the results here in this graphic. And sometimes a graphic is hard to kind of understand and see in a meeting like this, but essentially, on average, we're seeing that the south beaches are accreting sediment, which means they're accumulating sediment and the beaches are widening. On the north side, we're noticing a pattern, a long-term pattern of erosion, particularly by the Samoa dunes. And it's in the range of 5 to 9 feet of beach loss per year. And this pattern seems consistent with an overall general net transport of sediment from the south to the north, given the orientation of the coastline, the approach of the storms and the waves. And the channel is interrupting that flow of sediment, so you can get an accumulation here and a deficit here. This has been observed up and down the west coast, the east coast, where you have longshore transport. Santa Barbara Harbor has very similar to this. And you'll downcast the sediment. To introduce it back, it's like blood in your veins. You take it out and you move it around instead of just taking it out and draining the system of sediment. And sediment is a critical resource, especially now with sea level rise and the proposed infrastructure development here. Sea level rise needs to be accommodated, and the students need to continue to provide a protective barrier for this new critical infrastructure that's proposed for wind energy here. So also the recreational benefits, the surfing benefits, you definitely need to have sand in the system for a sandy system to work. You can't have offshore sandbars if you don't have sand. So from a surfing standpoint, all that kind of stuff, you really don't want to see a system like this being scarred from sediment loss of the beach. People can't walk on the beach, enjoy the beach. It becomes a hazard if you're walking there and there's big waves smashing into a beach scarp or escarpment of the dunes there. So that's the goal of the project. And like I said, we're going to take a portion of it. We're going to do this incrementally so that we can gauge how it works. And if it's successful as we anticipate it will be, then we'll move forward with this as being the standard practice for disposal here. From an economic operational standpoint, it doesn't seem at this point that it's going to impact cost or impact our ability to maintain the shipping channel, because I know that that is absolutely critical to the local community and the regional economy. This is currently the only deep water draft harbor between San Francisco and Humboldt Bay. It's a harbor of refuge. It is critical that this deep water channel is maintained at 48 feet. So we're not proposing anything that would limit our ability or to fully accomplish our number one mission, which is to maintain the shipping channel here. The area that we would propose here is a similar distance. It might take a little bit longer to do the thin layer placement, but operationally, we don't think it's going to be that much of a. So, yeah, I think that's all I should say. So here's kind of a graphic of what the operations will look like in graphic format here. So off to the left is a picture of the dredge, disposing of the material. We're going to try to do this in a thin layer placement. This was very successful up on the mouth of the Columbia, and the Northwest partners back here at Table 5 are more than happy to explain their experiences here with this. But the dredge will maintain forward momentum, dredge in here, move over here, and start moving in a direction of the captain's choosing for safety with the waves, and thinly layer this material out. It will fall from the bottom of the dredge, fall through the water column, hit the bottom. It's going to, 99% of this material will settle immediately. And that's because of its sandy nature, as opposed to the fine grained sediments of the interior bay, which remain in suspension due to the wave energy and turbulence in the water column. You'll see there is a temporary turbidity plume that results in this. That is an impact and can impact fisheries, but it's a very, very temporary impact. Material quickly settles to the bottom. And so these thin layer placements will slowly but surely nourish this portion of the section of the littoral cell. Wave action will move that sediment in its natural processes onshore and offshore, which happens seasonally. Our sand is constantly moving on and offshore with the seasons, and then in the long-term process, it's moving alongshore, given the nature of the angle of the waves that drive longshore sediment transport. So by doing this, we allow nature to operate as it naturally would upon the sediments, and replicates the way the system will operate in the channel there. Next slide, please. So we recognize that some of the potential impacts to the benthic community, and particularly fishing resources, crab fishing resources in particular, are of great concern in the Northwest and the Portland area. We know that they will be of concern to fishermen here. And so they did some very, very informative visual studies. Well, we have a movie available. It's also on YouTube. That filmed the operation. So here we have a crab attraction, bait box, and here the crabs are investigating the bait box before the arrival of the dredge. These are frame grabs from the movie. So I welcome you to go back to Table 5 and see the movie. And we're talking about, here's a length scale, 2.5 inches. So you can see what the net deposition is as the dredge moves by. We do this thin layer placement. And so here they are. Here they sense the arrival of the dredge, either through the noise in the water column, from the propeller wash, and you can see that they start to avoid the area. Next, here you can see that the turbidity plume kind of entering the area. That guy's booking it out of there. He's almost gone. The other crabs have left. So they they're smart critters. They know to avoid what they see as a disturbance, and they do so. Next slide. Here, the plume continues to make progress over the bait box. The crabs continue to leave the area and disperse. And this is the final frame. I believe this is a minute or so. Yes, 1.5 minutes after. And you can see there's a little bit of deposition here. It's very thin amount of deposition. And the crabs have kind of vacated the area. They don't seem to have been adversely impacted. So our Portland district has a lot of this scientific knowledge built up from their experience disposing in the nearshore area from their mouth of the Columbia and road dredging. Likewise, us in San Francisco, we didn't do thin placement in San Francisco. We had a much more confined area, and they just bottom dump. There was some concern with the crab fishing fleet up there. A lot of crab fishermen put their pots actually in our disposal area. We notify them well in advance, weeks to a month in advance before our dredging. They know to get their pots out of there. We have not observed or heard any kind of long-term impacts to the adverse impacts to the crab fishery or other fisheries in there. Actually, they kind of like it because the crabs get attracted after the treatment's placed. The other benthic critters that they like. So next slide, please. So that's that. That's kind of it shows you a little bit of the physics of what's happening there with this turbidity plume. And like I said, we have a lot of science developed on this. We have a lot of experience in the San Francisco district, where we work with our sister scientific agencies, the U.S. Geological Survey, our ERDIC, which is Engineering Research Development Center, Scripps Institution of Oceanography, and others. I know we have long-term data and familiarity and experience with what to expect with this, an operational standpoint, economic standpoint, environmental standpoint. Let's see, next slide. So now I'm going to hand it over to Tiffany Chang, who is our coastal engineer on this project, and she's going to describe to you a little bit about what we plan to do to monitor this site. Planning is still underway, but she's going to help in detail. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Peter, and thank you again, everyone, for taking the time to be here this evening. So we will be evaluating the performance of our nearshore pilot placement through a comprehensive monitoring program, and the goals of our monitoring plan are twofold. So first, to evaluate changes in the nearshore morphology at the placement site itself, as well as the littoral zone by Samoa Dune. So we want to know after placement, where does the sediment go? Does it make its way up onto the beach face? How far does it get, et cetera. And secondly, monitoring potential impacts to benthic habitat and species before, during, and after placement. And we're going to be working actively with our project partners to really detail that out in the coming project phases. So right now we're exploring an array of different data collection methods, but we are looking to gather information about coastal processes before, during, and after placement, waves, currents, water levels with in situ gauging, making use of multi-beam bathymetric surveys for shallow water bathymetry data, as well as collecting shore transects and beach profiles to get that complete profile from the nearshore zone, as well as collecting water quality measurement data, specifically looking at turbidity, as Peter went over in the last couple of slides, sediment sampling, as well as other data sets to support biological monitoring. And James Zulis, who's the chief of survey, he and I will be staffing station 3, which will be in the middle. So feel free to come by afterwards and ask us questions.
Great. So next steps, where are we in our project timeline here? So here we are, we're in a public meeting in November 2nd, and thank you all for joining and making this a great event. We are in the nascent stages of the planning for this project and the permitting. We will be getting permits from the Coastal Commission, EPA partners, and Water Quality Control Board and others, and interacting with them on terms and conditions of the permits as we plan this and best plan it for success with the input of all those other partners. That will continue through the 2024 through the summer. We will dredge as usual and dispose of goods in 2024. As I said, this pilot project is not going to interfere with our primary mission at the Corps, maintaining safe navigation in the harbor. We hope to implement this, if all goes well, through this planning process and permitting and getting your feedback and everything in 2025. And so that we no longer waste this incredible resource at huge volumes and put it out here where it does no good, it just mounts up and causes shipping navigation hazards. We want to keep that in the system, and we want to start doing that post haste. So we're shooting for a target of the 2025 season. We're looking at about potentially 500,000 cubic yards, maybe less. That's a significant fraction of the material. Place it there and then really starting a monitoring effort and seeing how it performs, works, gathering more input from the local community, the harbor district, how's this working out, and the impacts. And so this is something we will revisit. We're not here to just say, here's how it is, and we're doing this. We're very looking forward to your input, your concerns, and partnering with everybody, the stakeholders in the local community, to make sure that this is a success and that this environment system remains whole and healthy. So that's our goal, that's our timeline. And so now we'd like to have our, as Dr. Beach indicated, we're going to have a little question and answer period. I will field the questions, and if I can't answer them, I'm going to direct them to our technical experts we've gathered here. And so please feel free, let it rip. Bring on the questions. We really want to hear your feedback. And then we're going to also have an opportunity for more personal engagement at the tables, as was mentioned. Yes, sir.
Right now, you're up thinking about 20 fathoms, and I know the Wilford's out there about 15 fathoms. On the north side of the jetty, how shallow can you come in to deposit that material? That's only about 8-9 fathom in that area.
We're looking at about a 10 fathom critical threshold. So I'm saying, work closely with the dredge captains to kind of outline areas that may be feasible. Did this years ago. We have the benefit of Terry Giroux. He was a mate on the SEOs, actually. So operational safety is of primary importance, obviously. In San Francisco, it's a little bit more quiescent. We can get into 35, 40 feet of water at the high tides. We're hoping here to get into the 40 to 60 foot range. We'll have an area that's expanded a little deeper than that, just for operational flexibility. But we have identified bathymetric lines along here. I saw there was an old school NOAA nav chart around. I guess it's something here. I'm old school. I love those old nav charts. And you can actually see the bathymetric lines on there. So we'll definitely be operating in, say, the 40 to 80 foot range, depth range, and that's to be determined still. There's what's called a depth of closure. So that as the waves move, they exponentially decay. Water particle motions, circular motions, parabolic motions, elliptical motions, excuse me. They decay with depth. So if there's a certain depth where the waves won't move the sediments, and that's kind of what's happening here. So it's not a dispersive site. We want the sediment to disperse it naturally in the system, to be mobile under the action of waves. So the depth of closure is dependent on the wave height. And you guys get some very large waves here in the wintertime, as you all know. And so potentially 60 to 80 feet, the waves can move that sediment. So that's our target range. Yes, ma'am. And EPA is on the line. That's correct. Thank you. If Alan or Jen, if you would like to weigh in on that.
I would hand that over to Alan as our oceanographer. Alan.
Yeah, what Peter has described is, very accurate. I mean, the ocean disposal site, when it was designated in 1995, all the previous studies before that in the previous years, the idea was to, have a site that could be used for many decades, 4 or 5 decades. And so when the entrance channel was deepened, it effectively cut that lifetime significantly. And it looks like it basically cut it in half, because I think the annual dredging volumes actually doubled. So, and because this sand, it does not disperse as easily as fine grained material that would be dredged from the upper inner channels in Humboldt Bay. So that sand, basically, it was deposited at the hoods and stayed there and created that really nice base of what could have been a pyramid, probably, if we continued to dump on it. And as Peter has also described, the way the coastal currents go in terms of transporting sand, that jetty, which is quite a large jetty compared to many other harbor locations around the country, was very effective in blocking that northward movement of sediment. So the whole idea is to put sand in that immediate area north of the North Jetty and let nature take its course, and hopefully provide nourishment to that system, that north area, and keep that beach stabilized.
Great, thank you very much, Alan. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Jennifer Savage. I work for the Surfrider Foundation, and so my question will be for the given the concern about and the interest about this area, it's like the best surf spot sometimes in Humboldt County. Have you considered including any kind of recreational monitoring? I know the Coastal Commission has projects up and down the coast where they have incorporated surf monitoring as a condition for approval for permitting, and I know that's something like we would probably want to see, and it could be really positive, because if it improves, the sandbar, then that's like a thing to carry forward to talk about the benefits of the project. So
I think that's a great idea. I mean, my experience in the San Francisco region was anecdotal, mostly knowing the surfing community, Surfrider Foundation. I think we should devise a more formal approach as to, that might be difficult scientifically. It's a very qualitative thing. Hey, how are the waves today? Oh, they're great. Oh, they suck. Oh, I got hammered. Oh, I got a great ride.
it's always fun.
But we could work with your group and try to devise a semi-quantitative methodology, or through.
There are this is an evolving thing that has been happening in the state of California. So it wouldn't just necessarily be from scratch, but I can follow up separately.
That sounds great.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Thank you.
If you could, over there at the environmental booth, at the end of this, we'd love to hear more about it.
Awesome. And then just one quick question. Will the slides be made public? It'd be great to be able to share them with other stakeholders.
And we're recording the meeting, I think, as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, at each table, there will be placards and marks, and we can write down questions and concerns at each table.
Now I'm really nervous. I didn't know it was on tape. Come on. Yes, ma'am.
I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more on the actual source of the sediment that's in the channel that's being dredged. Is it mainly just the sediment that's being disrupted, like the longshore transport that's been disrupted by the channel, or is it from like more inland sources, and how closely does it match the beach that it would theoretically be going to?
That's a great question. And that is absolutely what we do with our physical processes and identifying what the meets and bounds of the littoral cell are. And I will engage Tiffany here because she's our coastal engineer, but yeah, the Eel River is a huge source of sediment. And in the general terms, that sediment comes into the system and then travels north, given the orientation of Humboldt, kind of facing to the northwest. So it is absolutely compatible. It's derived from, we think that the sand is coming here and around the north spit. So, the south tip, jetty tip, excuse me. So it is beach quality sand that's most likely 90% or more interrupted from the flow field here and filling in the channel with water, stretching it out. Is there anything you would like to add to that?
No, that's, yeah, that's exactly it. You answered the question.
Okay.
Yeah, primarily it's coming from, yeah, the longshore transport.
So, and that is something that I want to emphasize to everybody. This is clean sanding material. There's rigid testing protocols that are required for all of our dredging projects. You know, we handle the material appropriately to its characterization from chemical analysis, bioassay, what impacts it might have to benthic critters, and grain size. And so there's a grain size characterization. You know, it varies where you are, onshore, offshore, and we will definitely make sure that that material matches where you place it. Now, hoods is the catch-all. You need to maintain the shipping channel. You got to have a place to put it. So hoods is that catch-all. So hoods takes muddy material, sandy material. Of course, it's all tested, but it's we're going to be more restrictive in what is eligible to go here. And all indications that we've had years of testing is that this material is very compatible. It's derived from the adjacent coastline, interrupting the sediment pathways. You also have the Mad River, so it's a kind of complicated system actually, with numerous inputs and sinks, but predominantly the Eel River is the big daddy. That's the elephant in the room. It dumps a lot of sediment. Yes, sir.
You might have said this already, but you said this is a pilot project and talking about moving about 100,000 cubic yards out of a million. How long is the pilot, and is there a plan to sediment?
So that's part of our planning process at the stage we're in now. We want to hear your concerns. Is 500,000 too much, too little? You know, you're going to have some. Our long-term goal, we think, based on experience around the nation, on the West Coast, that it's going to work and it's going to be feasible operationally. So we would like to place most of the material. For instance, San Francisco, we place about 90% of the material. It's helping next infrastructure down. But we want to do this incremental. We don't want to just change it and say, oh, we're locked into this. There's impacts that we didn't foresee, concerns that we didn't appreciate greatly. So our target range is, right now, we're planning at about half of that. So we take a minimal approach. But that is still to be determined. Is anybody else on the team waiting on that?
Yeah, I think just to add, I mean, right now we're foreseeing a one-time pilot placement and evaluating, you know, pre and post evaluation of that before we make a decision about utilizing the site.
Yeah, we're definitely going to take the scientific data and community feedback before we implement it. Now, San Francisco, for instance, we are now designating that site EPA as a full-time use site. It's been in a demonstration project for years because you keep gathering data and it works, but now it's getting finally formally designated. So that process can take a while. Yes, sir.
I have a question. I just might something. But I'm just curious if the goal is to toss it out of the spoils for, they wanted to improve the beach and eventually the spoils are going to come onto the beach.
That is to be determined. They will, and there's
is it to enhance the beach? I thought it was for sea level rise. And
that is correct.
Okay, so I guess why aren't they just pumping it right on the beach and skipping the dredge, the hopper dredge, and just put it on the beach?
So the question is, what's the benefit? What's the goal of the sediment once we place it there? Is it to end up on the beach? And if so, why not just pump it on the beach? And there's a couple of reasons for that. So in San Francisco, one of the things I had a tough time, the community, we did just do a beach nourishment project where it got pumped on the beach and then the sand goes away and people are like, oh, what a waste. So the system is pretty complicated. Most of the nearshore system happens underwater. So the beach migrates offshore to form offshore sandbars. In the wintertime, the wave energy pulls that sand off to create sandbars. The waves break on those sandbars, the energy is dissipated through turbulence, and it brings the beach into balance. In the summertime, the sandbars go down under the action of smaller waves, short crested waves, and the beach gets wider. Your observations of the beach dynamics up here might, this might ring a bell with you. And so when you place the material offshore, you nourish that transect from this end. When you place it on the beach, you nourish it from this end. And it's going to move, it's going to oscillate back and forth. And some of it's going to be lost. Some of it's going to move in other places. But in general, the net transport is this way. So by nourishing at this end, you might not immediately see it at the beach. The offshore bars will see it. You'll get theoretically, if you build it up enough, the waves will break and dissipate their energy through turbulence of the white water. That's less energy attacking the sand dunes and eroding the beach. So that's kind of, in general terms, how the system works. Now, why not just go the extra step and pump it ashore? And indeed, we do that in places. It is very much more costly, time-consuming, difficult to permit. We got to install pipelines, et cetera, et cetera. So from an economic standpoint, it's much more feasible and efficient to let nature and the waves and the wind that drive those waves put that material, some fraction, for free on the beach and be on the sandbars. It's very expensive to pump it on shore, and then those waves are going to grab it and take it back anyway. So there is a balance there. Now, in some instances, it does really pay for recreational benefits. In Southern California, you have homes on the bluff. They're losing their homes in Sonoma County. They need beach there now. They can't wait for the process of years of this offshore sandbar migration, onshore, offshore, to nourish the beach. And we're talking about, even though 1 million cubic yards is a large volume of sand, it's a drop in the bucket of the system here. So it's really the time. It's when you make this your general practice over years and decades that you're really going to see this play out and benefit that area of the beach. Yes, sir. Yes, Alan, I think.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to what Peter Moll was saying, and I didn't catch the name of the gentleman who asked the question, but it's a great question. But as Peter has said, the ideal situation is that you feed, you do the beach nourishment from both sides. You can get the immediate benefit of putting the sand directly on the beach. You really do also have to focus some energy and investment of this beach nourishment in the offshore, the subtidal area, and building up a sandbar, basically. And it does two things, as Peter's already described. It attenuates the waves and actually can, slow down beach erosion from large waves coming in. You dampen those waves and reduce that energy. And in fact, that is the quandary of Southern California. There are some places where literally the sand has eroded from beaches all the way up to these rock revetments, these seawalls that have been built. And so they are actually in the process that they're basically doing these design team competitions, trying to figure out the best solution, which is actually involving both sides, direct placement of sand, and then figuring out how to attenuate the waves that, especially in the wintertime, will erode those beaches. So I just wanted to add those fine points because it really is a serious issue. And fortunately, the offshore Eureka area is not like Southern California, where things are quite extreme.
Yes, ma'am.
My name's Jen. I'm with one of the driving forces for this proposed being the offshore wind terminal. It's in an area that's very susceptible to sea level rise and for sea elevation. I wondered if you could elaborate on it. It's With the additional dredging that's being proposed with the terminal, I'm just not clear on how that fits in.
Okay, as I mentioned, long before the wind energy was proposed, we began investigating this back in the aughts. So it's not really the wind energy program that is driving this, although I do think that this has the potential to fortify and burnish the longevity of the infrastructure that's going to be built there. Because right now, as that one slide indicated, we're seeing erosion on the North Spit. And if that continues, unabated, unmitigated, under sea level rise, I don't know the specifics of not versed enough in that. Maybe Larry would be, but at what level would that breach and impact that infrastructure? I am not sure of that, but I do know that other areas of the state, as sea level rise comes up, infrastructure gets threatened. And so we definitely don't want to see erosion on the North Spit and then have that breach, that narrow barrier of sand there. In terms of your other question with the dredging that's going to be required to develop the terminal, that material would not be proposed for this area. Because as I mentioned, the grain size characteristics, the sediment quality and characteristics of that material would not be compatible with this nearshore area. Now, it may be compatible with in-bay restoration or beach placement. And Larry, would you like to speak to maybe the infrastructure defense or the susceptibility of the new infrastructure to sea level rise and any concerns you have with that and how this may benefit that? And then to the woman's question, also, what is the long-term plan to beneficially reduce the volume of sediment that you may be removing to accommodate the terminals?
Well, in all the conversations we've had, there's really no connection between what you're proposing, the near-term nearshore disposal site and the offshore wind project. I think this has been driven way before the offshore wind and the Coastal Commission and the regulatory agencies basically been pushing you to do this for a long time. I'm always hesitant, and I hate people to say that we're not going to take material from there. It's really a question of, is the material compatible? Not where it comes from, or whatever it is, that if it's compatible with the grain size, et cetera, then it should be beneficially reused instead of being dumped. But if it's not compatible, then it shouldn't be used. But I think really the point I think that you were trying to make is more of if we don't build up the beaches, then ultimately the dunes may go, and that's the front line of defense for sea level rise. And it's not just the offshore wind project, it's really the entire Samoa Peninsula. And the beach and dunes really provide that front line of defense for our region.
Yes. Did that answer your question?
It did. I just have one more. Biological monitoring include crab monitoring. As we know, that's where a lot of crab fishermen focus for efforts.
It definitely will. I mean, that's one of the concerns, and that's why we're most fortunate to have our partners from the Portland District who have extensive experience with this, and also had the local fishing community up there was very concerned. And so we can hear about some of their concerns. You're welcome to speak to them directly. Terry, Rod, is there anything that you would like to add to that?
Chris Wagner, who works for NOAA Fishery Service, Point Adams Research Station, helped us greatly in studying effects ground and he came up, Kurt's idea based on our objective. He came up with the idea to meet it with cam pods. I recorded the video. Very implemented a system and actually implemented crab with receivers and tracked crab through the area and put them into a place. So he's done a lot of groundbreaking work. And I recommend getting about 35 minutes. Web researcher, he's working all over the place.
And so we're gonna lean heavily on our partners. We always do. Terry Giroux is critical in getting us contracted, working with the SEOs to do the dredging, and we're most fortunate to be able to reference their experiences and benefit from that. And so we're not vetting the wheel from scratch here. Yes, ma'am. Hey, congratulations.
Do you
partnerships, specific partnerships with folks on campus? And if not, are there opportunities for colleagues to engage in this? And I think that in this area, we all are trying to create and support this resource. We have to be really fantastic.
I think that that is fantastic. And in the past, when we used to have the Humboldt biannual Humboldt Symposium, we did partner with some physical oceanographers at Humboldt State at that time. But I have since lost contact with those folks, and so we haven't kind of engaged with that, but I would, please contact me. I'll pass it on to Dr. Peach. And I think that's something that we would all very much welcome.
That'd be great partnerships.
Hey, great.
Yeah, we'd love to.
Yeah.
Savannah's here, located here.
Yes, sir.
Sorry. I haven't heard of it.
Okay.
Okay.
So we've been talking a lot about the North Spit, and I want to talk about a little more expansive view of the littoral south. Have a collaboration that's been going on for the past 7 years called the Humboldt Coastal Resiliency Project. And one of our main goals we have multiple goals, but one is to examine adaptation measures for sea level rise and more frequent storms. So far more than the North Spit, I think, is very worthy recipient of these dredged spoils. But what we're seeing is that the south end of the littoral spit, which is south of the mouth of the Bad River, is much more sediment starved and has by far the worst erosion going on. So I'm wondering if,
And it's that's up here, right?
Into Bad River, I think
Eel. Okay.
So I'm wondering if, since it sounds like you're not using all your dredged spoil, whether that is a potential, whether there's any reasons it couldn't be brought down there, feasibility wise or in the future.
We have a new program, actually, and maybe Dr. Beach can speak to this. It used to be, we used to have a partner called sharing partner. It was an onerous process. I believe it's called section 125 now.
Yeah.
And the local entity can request sediment from our dredging navigation program. And there's a cost increment, and maybe you could, but the short answer is yes. And it's something that we would very much like to partner with you and find adequate locations to help benefit local systems. And Dr. Beach can speak to how you go about doing that now in this new streamlined process.
Yeah, so on an annual basis, the Corps will now be implementing dredge material management plans with a 5-year outlook. So each year will progress 1 year, but be looking 5 years ahead. As part of that process, we'll be going to the communities where we dredge and seeking input in the public input process on sites that could receive material or other beneficial uses of material. These will then go into essentially a spreadsheet dredge material management plan and allow us, in this case, we're a little bit more advanced in terms of identifying the potential nearshore replacement site and permitting it. But once it's identified and on one of these annual 5-year look ahead dredge material management plans, we'll be able to start going through the process of evaluating it further and permitting it to accept material.
So you'll be returning.
Yeah, so fiscal year 2024 is the first year that the Corps will be funded to implement these annual dredge material management plans with a 5-year outlook. These were promulgated under what's known as the Water Resources Development Act of 2020. And the section is 125A and C. And that information is freely available on our website. We can provide the links. Absolutely. That's exactly the kind of input we're looking for, because without you bringing that up, in this case, we wouldn't even know about that opportunity. So, thank you.
Great. Yes, sir.
Well, I was gonna essentially say, so that section of shoreline south of the Eel River is by far our most vulnerable section of shoreline. We have very small vacuum dams. We get on the wash and so we went out. And it's also because of our longitudinal vertical motion close to the trench. It's also got the highest rates of relative sea level rise, probably almost 2 millimeters higher than the location in the lake.
Okay.
So it's, I mean, I would, if I had my way to do it, I'd go south now. I think we're reaching, you know, there.
Do you have a sense of the distance from the entrance channel to that location?
It's just past the over.
Probably.
Yeah.
Well,
It's just past table left. It's just not.
yeah,
That's something we would have to evaluate from an economic standpoint too, because he's dredged. The hopper dredge is over $200,000 a day to operate. So we gotta get in here and gotta work.
Yeah.
And so when that, you have that, so that takes a little bit more planning. Whereas, as I mentioned, this, we're not seeing this big economic shift with this.
Yeah, so just to be transparent, this WRDA 2020, section 125A, we can evaluate these new sites if they cost more than what our federal standard is. So currently our federal standard is to go to hoods, then we will need a local cost sharing partner, but the cost share is only 35%. It used to be that if a local entity wanted that material, they'd have to pay 100% of the cost. And so this is really a step in the right direction.
Yes, sir.
This would be a question for the Portland district. I'm wondering about how you would have an adaptive management plan for placing the material in the long term. You plan on doing this on a repetitive basis year after year. You know, how do you go about developing what the trigger is for identifying if you place too much, or you know how the cycle is working? Obviously monitoring will play into that, but I'm just curious about the experience that you guys have had in identifying the threshold of what's too much or what you can do.
That's an excellent question. We didn't discuss in our slides adaptive management, but that's essentially what I'm driving at when I say we're going to do this incrementally and let the data and the science inform how we continue to move out. I think Mr. Moritz is the perfect candidate to field your question, if I may ask.
Well, every site is its own process. Depends what the objectives are. And I would say our motto is across the district, within the Corps of Engineers in general, do no harm and to have least regrets. And the best way to do that is to implement it incrementally, adapt to what we learn, and adjust. So the objective, for example, the objective is to not adversely affect wave conditions and we're going to be closer to shore now than hoods. Water depth 40 to 60 feet. Mounting of dredge material, place it over time, would be a concern if it mounted too high. So it would be a threshold type. For round purposes, 10% of the water. Small thing. So if you're at 50 foot of water depth, probably don't want to have a mound more than 5 feet high. How big this mound is also. And why do we not want to affect wave conditions? That would change the circulation in the area and perhaps affect certain, which is we have hit them. It's just an example. It's not what we have to do, going that out. Other considerations might be if we had a desired or an intended pathway for the material to move, or more importantly, a pathway we didn't want it to move. James Ollis's group would monitor annually the high resolution definitive. If we saw that area moving a teardrop in the correct direction, good, we're good to go. But if it was moving in the wrong direction, like back toward the entrance, or we have to dredge it right away, we might want to modify our operation, things like that. But it requires adaptation and monitoring and informed stakeholders to let us know what y'all are doing.
And we also will work with the EPA, like the EPA's hood expansion was in a sense adaptive management because it mounted in an unanticipated, more drastic fashion than was planned for. So you have time for just a couple more quick questions. I don't want to miss anybody out. Miss anybody? Yes, are you in the back?
Yes, I want to. Any studies that you want to take?
Yeah, I'll defer to Tiffany here. She, we do a short program. geologists who fly LiDAR and those types of things, and describe the question was how to quantify specifically the volumes and the changes in shoreline profiles.
That's correct, because from my observation, the place that the spit to be based on this. They almost lost road their last one.
Okay.
Seems like that's the spot.
Okay, Tiffany and James can speak to that, the monitoring.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm not sure if you saw the graphic in the middle of the presentation with the accretion and erosion curves, but that was from our long-term monitoring data for the shoreline on either side of the channel. So, I mean, we have that report, and it's, it's based off of, our monitoring data, and we've done plenty of.
I think we have monitored in Bay some, but not as much as on the open coast. So the area you're describing, I'm less familiar with, but it's certainly something if you want to give us feedback, we can look into it.
You can put a sticky up here.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Put a sticker on the map.
When the Colonel and Stu were here a couple weeks ago, I took them out and showed them that exact location that you're at, that you're talking about. The
Okay.
Erosion right there at the
Which
north.
means that the spit 80 more from that side.
Okay.
Yeah, you were here also.
So I have time for one more question from this gentleman, Jeff, I guess.
I've heard the monitoring brought up several times. I have a question. Having worked in these kind of environments myself, I'm Jeff Cornell. I'm an emeritus faculty at Humboldt. I think I've worked there.
Great.
Are you doing a pre-monitoring study? Are you going to sample before you dump this?
Well, that's definitely part of it. You want to baseline the area from the benthic community and the bathymetry. And like I say, we have old studies that I've partnered with, teams partnered with folks from Scripps, Bill O'Reilly. You may be familiar with the CDEP program and POPs. So we have the wave field and the transport pathways model, and we've done a lot of the bathymetry surveying. So the short answer is yes, there's definitely going to be a baseline established upon which we will compare and evaluate for adaptive management to assure success. Okay. And Alan was up there. I don't know if he was going to reply or anything, but I think we are. Thank you everybody for your engagement and all the questions. They're great questions. We really, really appreciate your input and your enthusiasm. And we want to hear the good, the bad. You think this is great. You're worried about this, or this is horrible. We're here to really hear all your concerns and to try to make sure that this project is a success as we maintain navigation with the bay. So, just as a refresher, we're going to have folks available at the stations. Station 1 is reach coordinator. It's building soil. Station 2 is dredging beneficial reuse. Station 3 is survey and monitoring type of questions. Station 4 is the environmental impacts that the community. That's how we're doing that. And Station 5 is our Northwest partners and some of their experiences on what's exploring from the thin layer placement of the Columbia. So there is a rush